I'm Corinne Hale, a mother, a fighter, and the woman the city once called the Queen of Law. When my daughter-in-law tried to steal my son's home and his peace, I didn't just show up to court. I showed up with the truth. What happened next changed everything. My daughter-in-law tilted her chin when my son stepped into the courthouse, like the whole building existed to admire her. But when I walked in behind him, the judge paused mid-motion as if a memory had snagged his sleeve. "Miss Hale," he murmured, startled. "You." The benches went quiet. Kiana Mercer shot me a narrowed look, and her parents, done up in matching confidence, traded quick, anxious whispers. My son, Andre, shifted his weight on a black carbon fiber crutch and tried to sit taller. I rested my hand over his knuckles. They were cold and damp, the way your hands get when you're holding on to the last rung. Judge Altenbrigg took the bench in that paneled room where the wood always smells faintly like rain. His eyes skimmed past the attorneys, landed on Andre with a flicker of human pity, then locked on me. For a beat, he looked not like a judge, but like a man who had walked into a room and found the past waiting in his chair. I didn't bow my head. I crossed the aisle, set my scuffed briefcase, old, soft leather with a stubborn zipper, on the table, and clicked it open. The sound echoed, crisp as a starter pistol. Kiana sat across the room in an apple-green suit with glossy heels. The set of her mouth said she'd already decided how the story would end. Her brother lounged behind her in a designer hoodie, and her mother adjusted a strand of pearls that didn't belong to any Sunday I've ever known. They wore victory like cologne. Andre steadied his crutch and breathed slow. A year ago, his stride could clear half a block without effort. Now every step was a negotiation, body against pain, pride against gravity. He's 34, tall like his late grandfather, the kind of man who once twirled his little girl in the kitchen just because a Stevie Wonder song came on. The accident took more than balance. It took the easy music out of him. But he was here, in this place where people swear to tell the truth, and sometimes finally do. Bronze Harbor, our lakefront city that pretends to be gentle, was gray that morning. A drizzle tapped at the courthouse windows like it had a question. Out on Jefferson Square, cameras had gathered the way gulls gather near a pier. Folks whispered as we went in, "That's the Mercer case. They say the house is on the line. They say the child is, too." I kept my face plain. I have never learned the rich woman's talent for wearing indifference like silk. Kiana crossed her legs and tapped a heel as if the floor owed her rhythm. Her attorney, Dana Whitaker, a woman I once respected in a different decade, stacked fresh pleadings like they were starter bricks for the story she meant to build. On our side, Andre's folder looked thin and honest. Honest is lighter to carry, but it doesn't always win. "Your Honor," Dana began, voice sleek as a showroom car. "My client has endured untenable conditions. Mr. Hale is unable to meet the demands of partnership or parenting. We will be petitioning for division of assets acquired during the relationship and appropriate custody orders that protect a minor from instability." The words were glassy and polite, which sometimes cuts worse. I watched Kiana tip her head toward her mother, whispering with a smile you give a waiter when you think you own the restaurant. A smile that forgets heaven keeps receipts. The first time I understood that life would try to break us came years back, long before this room. Andre was 9 when his father closed a suitcase without looking me in the eye. We lived then on the west side, in a brick duplex that warmed slow in winter and held summer like a stubborn sermon. After I washed the dishes, I sat on the edge of Andre's bed, tracing circles on his back until his breath evened out. It was the only night I let myself make a promise out loud. "It's you and me, baby. We do not bend for storms. We learn their names and walk through them standing." I got a day job at a municipal office, the kind of work that teaches you how numbers can be used to help folks or to hide them. At night, I kept books for small storefronts, barbers, bakers, a seamstress who never met a hem she couldn't fix. That's how I learned the shape of paperwork and the smell of lies. If there's a gift I've got, it's not glamour. It's pattern. Andre grew up patient and quick-handed, a natural problem solver who could fix a radio with a safety pin. He became an installation tech, then a site lead, then a supervisor everyone called when the power grid coughed. On the day he closed on his 2-story place in Harborview, cream siding, black trim, a porch that made you say come on in, he pressed a key into my palm like a blessing. "We built this, Ma," he said. "Nobody's shoving us out of anything ever again." Enter Kiana. When she and Andre first brought sweet potato pie to my table, she laughed with her whole face and said she wanted 6 kids. She called me Miss Corinne until I told her that would never do, then called me Ma in a way that made me look twice and believe. In those early Sundays, she asked for my red beans recipe and helped rinse collards without wrinkling her nose. I believed because believing is the only way any family gets built. Then came the fall. A faulty lift on a commercial job near the shipyards. A pop like a knuckle-cracking wrong. A slide of metal. A human body that did not deserve that angle. Months of therapy later, Andre managed with a brace and a crutch. He kept jokes in his pocket for the hard days and swallowed quiet on the others. Kiana kept up the sweetness for a while. Brought soup, remembered pills, kissed his forehead like a stage direction. And then the gloss wore thin. Her dresses got louder. Her nights got later. Her phone learned new passwords. The word "we" in her mouth turned into me in small, careful degrees. I started hearing the wrong kind of whispers at the Saturday market. Mrs. Tolliver at the flower stall cleared her throat 3 different times before she said, "Miss Corinne, baby, I'm not one to carry tales, but I seen your girl in the window of the Indigo Lounge more than a few nights. And it wasn't your son she was with." The hurt wasn't surprise. The hurt was recognition. I tried not to say anything until I could say everything. That's another thing numbers teach you. One night when the house was thin with worry, I walked past Kiana's door and heard her voice distilled to its sharpest edge. "Listen to me," she was telling my granddaughter, Nia, who was 9 and tender as a knew him. "If the judge asks, you say your daddy can't manage. You say you're safer with me." There are sentences you never expect to hear in your own home. They sit on your chest like a building. I stood there with a glass of water going warm in my hand and understood that this wasn't a marriage argument. It was a campaign. The next morning I took Nia out back, beneath the persimmon tree we never could convince to ripen on time. We sat on the step where chalk dust lives. She kept her head down, the way children will when they're trying to be brave. "Baby," I said, "did you hear me come by last night?" She nodded. A tear made its way to her lip and stayed. "Grandma, I don't want to say things that aren't true." "You won't," I told her steady. "Our family doesn't trade truth for convenience. Not ever. That's how people get lost." Her little shoulders softened like I had set down a weight she'd been carrying since before she could name it. She squeezed my fingers. "I just want Daddy to know I'm not leaving him." "He knows," I said. "And I promise you, when adults forget their promises, I remember mine." That afternoon I unlocked a drawer I hadn't opened in more than a decade. Inside were remnants from a former life, a credential badge from the city's ethics office, a stack of old notebooks lined with my tight handwriting, and a contact card for a man who owed me 2 favors and an apology. His name is Lionel Cross. He does quiet work for loud problems. His office sits above a thrift store on Sparrow Street, where the building hums with secrets. He looked exactly the same, lean, careful, the kind of black man who reads everything before he talks. "Corinne Hale," he said, half laughing like he'd seen a ghost and owed her money. "What kind of trouble needs solving?" "The kind that wears perfume and carries a briefcase," I said. "I need to know who's financing Kiana's glow, and I need to know yesterday. There's a child in the middle and a house they're trying to turn into cash." Lionel didn't bother with speeches. He uncapped a pen and wrote 2 names and 3 dates on a yellow pad. "Give me 48 hours, he said. "And breathe." I did not breathe. I cooked instead, catfish with lemon, a skillet of cornbread, collards that remembered my grandmother. Food is a bridge when you don't know how to say the terrible thing out loud. 2 days later, Lionel slid into a back booth at the Pike Street Diner and set a thin envelope near my coffee. "You were right," he said. "It's not romance. It's logistics." Inside were printed statements and grainy photographs that made my throat go tight. Kiana stepping out of a midnight blue sedan that did not belong to us. A man opening her door, his hand on the small of her back like he owned the patent. Preston Vale, developer, party sponsor, the kind of man who puts his name on buildings and his problems in other people's names. Lionel tapped the second page. She's been meeting with a paralegal who sets up quick LLCs. There's a shell company with Andre's address on the filings. If this goes through, they'll claim leverage on a refi and move equity like it's luggage. I could taste metal in my mouth. And the child. She's being coached, he said softly. You already knew that part. I recorded enough to prove it, but you need to decide whether playing it in court helps the child or just scorches the ground. I folded the envelope and looked out the window where Bronze Harbor pretended to be kind behind a veil of drizzle. We don't scorch, I said. We harvest the truth. Then we plant better. When I left the diner, the rain had cleared. A thin band of pale sky cut through the clouds like a new page. I went home and set the envelope in my old briefcase, pressed the zipper closed, and sat on the edge of my bed until the house stopped ringing. That is how we arrived in this room, me, my son, and the truth we had gathered like winter wood. The case on the docket wasn't just a divorce anymore. It was a petition about guardianship, coercive control, and a house some people mistook for a prize. I placed my palm over Andre's hand and nodded once. Judge Brigg raised an eyebrow. Dana clicked her pen. Kiana tipped her chin. And I said, clear enough for the back row to hear. Your Honor, I'm here as Andre Hale's lay advocate and guardian in fact. We are ready to be heard. Judge Alton Brigg adjusted his glasses and studied me like he was weighing two clocks, one that told courtroom time and one that told the truth. Miss Hale, he said, voice even. You are not licensed counsel. I'm not, I replied. I am Andre Hale's mother and designated advocate under his durable power. I'm here to present facts, documents, and a request for safeguards for my granddaughter. Andre nodded, jaw set. Your Honor, I want my mother to speak for me when the pain gets loud. Brigg looked at the clerk, then back at us. The court will allow limited participation. You may present exhibits and question witnesses as to foundation. The court will appoint a guardian ad litem for the child before the day is out. Kiana's attorney, Ms. Dana Whitaker, a sharp, polished black woman in a charcoal suit, rose with a faint smile. We'll proceed, Judge. I stood, unzipped the old briefcase, and laid out the first row of bricks. Exhibit A, deed and purchase records for 1181 Willow Crest, Harborview. Dated 3 years before the marriage. Paid in full from Andre's wages and savings, with a verifiable money trail from his union credit account. The clerk examined the packet, then passed it up. Brigg skimmed, nodded once. Whitaker slid forward. Your Honor, while title predates marriage, this house became the marital residence. Equity appreciation is subject to division. Not under these facts, I said, steady. Exhibit B. The refinance that never was. My son declined 3 offers. He did not commingle title. What he did not know, what I only discovered last week, is that someone attempted to create leverage against this address through a newly formed shell entity. I placed a thinner folder on the rail. Harbor Sun Group, LLC. Registered 2 months ago. Manager of record, a paralegal out of Albright and Vale Holdings. Mailing address, a P.O. box tied to developer Preston Vale. The operating agreement lists domestic investment collateralization via residential equities. A murmur ran through the benches like a breeze under a door. Whitaker tried to cut in. Speculation. There's no executed lien. Exactly, I said. Because my son never signed. But someone prepared the ground to claim he did. Exhibit C. An email chain from the paralegal to Ms. Mercer's secondary account. A thread about timelines once the decree enters and moving quick before the injunction window. The phrase 2 birds with 1 signature appears 3 times. The clerk swallowed. Brigg's gaze fell to Kiana. She stared straight ahead, as if the front wall owed her protection. Next, I said softer. Exhibit D, a certified audio clip recorded in my home. It captures Ms. Mercer instructing Nia Hale, age 9, to tell this court her father cannot care for her and that she does not want to live with him. The child resists. Ms. Mercer threatens loss of contact if she refuses. Whitaker's chair scraped. Objection, privacy. Overruled for proffer. Briggs said, palm raised. The court will hear enough to determine necessity for interim orders. The first 10 seconds were all it took. The timbre of Kiana's voice when she wanted to win, the wobble in Nia's when she didn't want to lie. Briggs' gavel touched wood once. Not a bang, more a punctuation. This court issues an immediate temporary non-disposition order on 1181 Willow Crest, he said crisp. No sale, no refinance, no encumbrance, pending final judgment. Further, temporary joint physical custody to Mr. Hale and Ms. Hale, grandmother, with school night placement at the Willow Crest residence. Ms. Mercer will receive supervised parenting time through family services until the guardian ad litem reports. Phones will be surrendered for forensic imaging. Subpoenas to Harbor Sun Group LLC, Albright and Vale Holdings, and the Indigo Lounge for CCTV on listed dates. Kiana's mother whispered, Albright, Lord, and sank back. Whitaker lifted her chin. Judge, my client denies coaching and any association with the entity in question. Your denials are preserved, Briggs said. You'll have opportunity to respond. For now, the child's welfare and integrity of this property are paramount. I exhaled for the first time in an hour. When the court recessed, a buzz rose from the corridor like a generator coming online. Reporters leaned, microphones out. I tilted my briefcase to my chest and walked Andre and Nia into the side elevator, where the bailiff held the door with 2 careful fingers. In the car, Andre stared at the floor numbers. Ma, he said low. I hate that she heard that. He meant Nia. He meant the clip. He meant 100 other things fathers don't have words for. I touched his forearm. She heard herself choose truth. That matters. We made it home under a ragged winter blue sky. Nia went straight to the kitchen table and drew a house with roots, fat and certain, dropping through the page like they were thirsty. She printed 3 names across the porch. Daddy, Grandma, me. Then she added a tiny persimmon tree with a scribbled halo. Children always remember where promises were spoken. While the cornbread cooled, Lionel called. You stirred their nest, he said. The paralegal, girl named Tamara Bloom, just tried to wipe her work laptop. We imaged it last night. You've got invoices for consulting tied to dinners at the Indigo Lounge, plus a draft quitclaim deed with your son's name spelled wrong on page 1 and right on page 2. Sloppy hand never met a conscience. Will she talk? She might, he said. Folks who aren't paid enough to carry rich people's sins start thinking about their sleep. I'll lean. Also, Vale's people sent a text to Ms. Mercer during the hearing. Bailiff bagged the phone, but the preview lit up. It said, don't fold. We need movement on the lean. I looked toward the living room, where Nia had arranged her crayons by color, like tiny choir rows, and Andre was pretending not to be watching her. File your affidavit, I said. Tomorrow's about safety and sunlight. That night I sat at the old desk in my bedroom, the one with the drawer that sticks, drafting a motion plain enough for any person to read and strong enough to hold in wind. Motion to reframe proceedings as protective action involving coercive control and economic abuse. I laid out what had been done to my son's body, what had been attempted against his home, and what had been asked of a child who deserved a different lesson. Before midnight, the doorframe filled with a shadow. Andre leaned there, braced on the jamb. You were right to go back, he said. I didn't go back, I told him. I went forward with old tools. He smiled, crooked and tired. Same difference. We were back in Briggs' courtroom by 9. The gallery had grown. Bronze Harbor loves a tale where a Goliath gets measured. The newly appointed guardian ad litem, Ms. Tasha Bloom, a warm-eyed black attorney who wore her hair in a crown of twists, introduced herself to Nia with a sticker and a pen that sparkled. You're right. I'll listen, she told her. No one else talks over you. Whitaker opened with the kind of confidence that can't imagine a no. Your Honor, We moved to strike the audio as unlawfully obtained and to lift the non-disposition order. There is no evidence of imminent harm. I rose. Exhibit E. Bank transfers from Vale Urban Partners to Ms. Mercer's personal account, marked consulting, arriving the same weeks as Harbor Sun filings. Exhibit F. Draft documents from Ms. Bloom's device showing a quitclaim deed pre-populated for Mr. Hale's signature. Exhibit G. Text message preview from Mr. Vale to Ms. Mercer during yesterday's hearing, entered via chain of custody affidavit. Whitaker's pen stilled. Brig read, slow. When he reached the misspelled version of my son's name, one eyebrow climbed like it had nowhere else to be. He set the pages down. Ms. Whitaker, he said, I am not adjudicating crimes today, but I am not blind. The orders stand. Ms. Bloom, you have full access to the child's school, counselors, and both homes. Ms. Mercer, you will surrender all keys to 1181 Willow Crest within the hour. Bailiff, coordinate. Kiana's composure cracked just enough for the room to see the wire beneath. This is persecution, she hissed to Whitaker. I am the mother. Briggs' voice did not rise. And the court is the court. You will comply. On our way out, a familiar face waited near the double doors. Lionel, in a navy peacoat, a thick envelope under his arm. He didn't hand it to me. He handed it to the clerk. For the record, he said. Back home, we ate in sunlight for the first time in months. Mia insisted on pouring the sweet tea, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth like the task required engineering. Andre told a story about a customer who tried to tip him in scratch-off lottery tickets, and Mia cackled so hard she snorted. It was a small, ridiculous miracle. I stacked it neatly where I keep the others. After dishes, I stepped onto the porch with my phone. A message waited from an unknown number. You think you're clever. You don't know what you've walked into. PV. I smiled without humor. Men who live by leverage always mistake silence for fear. I typed back. I know exactly what I walked into. And out of. Bring your paperwork. Bring your conscience, if you can find it. Court's at 10. I slid the phone into my pocket and looked at the persimmon tree. It would never ripen on the calendar the nursery promised, but it ripened in its own time, and when it did, the sweetness was undeserved and perfect. Behind me, Mia's drawing hung on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a little brass key. Roots deeper than rumor. Branches wider than schemes. Tomorrow would be a longer day. There would be a witness who didn't want to be one, and a developer who preferred back rooms to bright rooms. But tonight was ours, and the house felt like it remembered us. Bronze Harbor's courthouse was built for intimidation. High ceilings, tall windows, marble that pretended to be eternal. Yet that morning it smelled like rain-wet coats and fear. I stood beside Andre, while the clerk called Hale versus Mercer. Kiana entered last, wearing a plum-colored blazer, her posture a warning flare. Behind her, Preston Vale strode in, a shark in linen, flanked by two aides with phones they never looked up from. He wasn't a party to the case, but money always finds a seat. Judge Brigg eyed him. Mr. Vale, you are not counsel of record. Vale's smile was a polished threat. Just here to support a friend, Your Honor. Then sit in the gallery and keep quiet, Brigg said. Kiana's lawyer, Ms. Whitaker, rose first. Your Honor, my client maintains no knowledge of these corporate filings. She was manipulated by outside interests. We move to dismiss the economic abuse claims and return to standard dissolution. I replied before Brigg could. Dismissal would mean erasing evidence that my granddaughter was coached and my son's home targeted by shell transfers. We have a live witness who can confirm who gave the orders. The door opened at the back. In walked Tamara Bloom, the paralegal. Early 30s, caramel-skinned, nerves flickering at the corners of her mouth. She wore a thrift store blazer that still had the tag thread in the sleeve. Brigg nodded to the bailiff. Ms. Bloom, you've been subpoenaed. Take the stand. Her voice wavered at first. I handled filings for Harbor Sun Group. Mr. Vale's executive assistant told me to use this address, 1181 Willow Crest, as collateral language. He said it was already approved by the homeowner's spouse. I stepped closer. Did you ever meet that spouse? Yes, she whispered. Mrs. Mercer. She brought the paperwork to me with signatures already in place. But I noticed the handwriting didn't match the ID copy she left. I kept a scan. Gasps rolled through the room. Whitaker lunged. Your Honor, this is self-serving hearsay. Brigg cut her off. Quiet, counsel. Continue, Miss Bloom. Tamara swallowed. When I hesitated, Mr. Vale called me into his office. He said if I valued my job, I'd file the deed and shut up. That's when I realized the deal wasn't just shady. It was theft dressed up as real estate. I handed her a printout. Is this the scan? She nodded, eyes wet. That's the forged signature. Brigg examined it, brow tight. The loop on it doesn't match Mr. Hale's authenticated record. Clerk, mark Exhibit H. Behind me, Andre exhaled shakily. His knuckles whitened on the crutch, but for the first time, the tremor was relief, not defeat. Kiana whispered to Whitaker, but Whitaker just stared ahead. Even lawyers know when a ship is tilting. During the recess, reporters swarmed. I gave them nothing but air. Truth doesn't need spin, I said, and ushered Andre and Nia into a side hallway. Nia clutched her notebook, whispering, Grandma, are we winning? We're surviving, baby, I told her. Winning comes after breathing. That afternoon, Lionel joined us at the prep table. Tamara's statement rattled them, he said. Vale's got lawyers circling the wagons, but the city's ethics board just reopened an investigation from 2 years ago. Same signature trick, different victim. Andre looked up. So he's done. Not yet, Lionel said. But close. He's trying to buy silence, same as before. I reached for my briefcase. Then tomorrow we turn silence into evidence. He smiled. Corinne, you never retired. You just took a long recess. When court reconvened, Vale's seat was empty. Only Kiana sat there, alone, spine rigid. The hum of murmured gossip filled the space. Brigg cleared his throat. Before we proceed, the court notes receipt of certified statements from the Department of Commerce confirming irregularities in Harbor Sun Group's filings. We will admit them into record. Whitaker whispered to her client, We can settle quietly. But Kiana shook her head so hard her earrings flashed. Pride is a stubborn lawyer. I rose. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to question Ms. Mercer directly. Brigg nodded. Proceed. I stepped forward, calm. Mrs. Mercer, do you recognize this document? The forged deed. Her jaw flexed. No. Do you deny bringing it to Ms. Bloom for filing? I don't recall. I held up another page. You recall texting Mr. Vale the morning of that filing. It's done, he'll never know. Whitaker shot up. Objection. Text authenticity. Foundation established. Brigg ruled. Kiana's voice rose. That text was about something else. What else? I asked gently. Her silence was answer enough. Mrs. Mercer, I continued, isn't it true that Mr. Vale promised you a condominium on Harbor Pier if you secured equity from 1181 Willow Crest? Her face drained color. I never. Please answer yes or no. Yes, she whispered. A ripple of low voices ran through the gallery. Anger, disbelief, vindication. All tangled together. Brigg leaned back. Let the record reflect the admission. I turned to my son. Andre's eyes were closed, his mouth trembling with both fury and release. Nia, seated quietly with Miss Bloom, the guardian ad litem, slipped her small hand into mine without looking up. When the gavel finally dropped that afternoon, Brigg ordered an immediate protective freeze on all accounts linked to the fraudulent filings. He referred both Vale Urban Partners and Ms. Mercer's involvement to the state's fraud unit. But he didn't stop there. Ms. Hale, he said, this court acknowledges your service in revealing systemic misconduct. You are granted temporary guardianship of Nia pending final custody review. Further, the court recommends the Bar Association reopen your credentials, should you wish to practice. For a heartbeat, I couldn't speak. The last time a judge had said my name in open court, it was to accept my resignation after a scandal I hadn't caused. Now, decades later, the same syllables tasted clean. Outside, camera flashes chased us down the courthouse steps. Lionel waved them off. Give the lady some air, he barked. Andre laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in months. You're trending, Ma, he said. The whole city's talking about the comeback of Corinne Hale. I don't want to come back, I answered. I want closure. Mia tugged my sleeve. What's closure? It's when you lock a door that should have been locked years ago, I told her. She thought about it. Then can we paint it pink? Baby, we can paint it any color you want. That night, as the three of us sat beneath the glow of the porch light, Andre reached into his pocket and unfolded a small envelope. Inside were the original house keys, scuffed from years on his ring. Ma, he said, placing them in my palm. Keep these. You built more than this house. You built us. I held the keys, felt their weight, and heard again the echo of my promise. It's you and me, baby. We do not bend for storms. Except now there were three of us, and a city learning that some storms clear the air. The next morning, Bronze Harbor woke up talking about us. Headlines rolled across every local station. Former city attorney Corinne Hale exposes developer scheme in court. Mother defends disabled son in landmark fraud divorce case. Queen of Law returns to the bench she once left in scandal. Andre turned off the TV before I could hear my own name again. Ma, you don't owe this city explanations. I don't, I said. But I owe truth to the people watching. They need to know what justice looks like when it's dragged through the mud and still stands. Lionel called before sunrise. Brace yourself, he said. Preston Vale was served at dawn. He's been subpoenaed to appear today. I laughed softly. So the spider finally has to walk into his own web. By 10, the courthouse lobby buzzed like a power line. The air carried that tense smell of expensive cologne and sweat. Reporters filled the gallery, and Judge Brigg had already doubled security. Andre leaned on his crutch, straight-backed but calm. Mia sat quietly beside the guardian ad litem, clutching the small teddy bear I'd given her, the one she called Truth. Then the door opened, and Preston Vale strode in. His suit was dove gray, his smile the color of arrogance. Cameras clicked even though none were supposed to. He nodded to Kiana, who didn't meet his eyes. Her confidence had cracked, her hands twisted in her lap like she wanted to rewind time. Briggs struck the gavel once. We are resuming proceedings in Hale versus Mercer. Mr. Vale, take the stand. Vale raised a manicured brow. On what grounds am I being called, Your Honor? I'm not a party to this case. You are an alleged financial participant in the fraudulent filings under review, Brigg replied. You'll answer the questions. He chuckled, that smooth, practiced laugh of a man used to boardrooms, not benches. Of course. I approached slowly, briefcase in hand. Mr. Vale, please state your relationship to Ms. Kiana Mercer. He smirked. A friend. A business consultant, occasionally. Occasionally? I opened the folder. Your bank transferred $21,000 in 3 months to her account marked consulting services. Yet there are no invoices. Would you like to explain the business deliverables? He paused. She was providing insight for a community project. Which project? I asked. The Willow Crest Redevelopment Initiative. The one involving my son's address as collateral? I slid another page forward. Your signature sits right under the forged deed. Same pen pressure, same ink batch. Shall I read the timestamp aloud? The courtroom murmured. Vale's smile flickered. Those were drafts, not filings. Drafts you paid to have submitted, I countered. And when Miss Bloom hesitated, you threatened her employment. Whitaker shifted uncomfortably. Even she didn't want to defend that. Judge Briggs' gaze sharpened. Mr. Vale, did you instruct your office to use Mr. Hale's property for your financing portfolio? Vale exhaled through his nose. I may have delegated. Business moves fast. Fraud moves faster, Briggs shot back. I turned to face him fully. Preston Vale, were you aware that your actions placed a disabled father at risk of homelessness? He hesitated. I don't handle personal. Yes or no? A long pause. Then, barely audible, yes. You could feel the room inhale. Reporters scribbled. Someone in the gallery whispered. He admitted it. Vale glanced at Kiana, who looked smaller now, the shimmer gone. You promised this would never reach court, he hissed. And you promised I'd get half, she shot back. The chain snapped right there. Two liars tripping over the same rope. After the confession, Whitaker tried to salvage pride. Your Honor, may we address the allegations against Miss Hale's own past? The public has the right to know. I stepped forward. Gladly. Let's finish every ghost at once. The room fell silent. 20 years ago, I said, steady, I resigned from the city attorney's office after a bribed judge overturned my conviction against a real estate conglomerate, Vale Urban Partners. Different name, same rot. They paid him to bury the truth. When the judge was later imprisoned, I disappeared quietly to protect my son from that noise. I looked directly at Vale. And now here we are again, same greed, different century. Brigg leaned forward. I remember that case. I was a young public defender then. You cross-examined me once. You were fierce and fair. Vale tried to interrupt. This is irrelevant. Brigg's gavel struck. Sit down, Mr. Vale. I'm reclaiming my own memory of justice. The audience erupted in murmurs and half applause before the bailiff barked for order. For the first time in years, I saw respect flicker back into faces that once looked at me with pity. Then the guardian ad litem rose. Your Honor, the minor child, Nia Hale, wishes to make a statement. Brigg hesitated. Is she ready? Yes, Tasha Bloom said softly. She wrote it herself. Nia stood, clutching her notebook. Her voice was quiet but clear. I love both my parents. But my dad and grandma make me feel safe. They tell the truth. My mom told me to say things that weren't true, and that hurt. I don't want anyone to be mad at her. I just want us to stop fighting so nobody has to be scared anymore. Her little voice trembled on that last sentence. You could hear tissue paper rustle as half the gallery wiped their eyes. Even Brigg blinked slowly. Thank you, Nia. That took courage. Kiana sobbed once, soundless. Vale looked away. By the afternoon recess, everyone knew how this story would end. Brigg summarized the record. Fraud attempt confirmed. Coercive behavior proven. Forged documents linked directly to Vale and Mercer. He adjourned until the next morning for sentencing and final custody terms. Outside, the courthouse steps felt lighter. Andre leaned against the railing, breathing the cold air like medicine. I don't even care about winning anymore, he said. Just knowing the truth is out there, that's enough. I smiled faintly. Justice is slow, but she shows up when you stop waiting and start walking. Reporters crowded again, mics flashing. Mrs. Hale, are you returning to legal practice? Will you sue Vale Urban Partners? Are you the queen of law again? I stopped, smiled for the first time in public, and said, I'm not a queen. I'm a mother who remembered the law is supposed to protect families like mine. Andre squeezed my shoulder. Nia reached up and held my other hand. And that was all the answer they needed. That night, I sat on the porch with Lionel. The sky above Bronze Harbor was clean, no clouds, just a pale moon over the lake. You think this changes anything? He asked. It changes everything, I said, because the city saw that truth doesn't retire. He chuckled. You ever miss the fight? I smiled. The fight never left me. I just learned to aim it. The final hearing drew a crowd so thick the bailiff had to form a human wall just to keep the hallway clear. Bronze Harbor hadn't seen this much attention since the mayor's scandal 3 years back, but this time, the story wasn't corruption, it was redemption. Andre leaned on his crutch at the courthouse entrance, the early sunlight turning the polished floor into gold. He looked steady, not healed, but whole. Nia clung to his sleeve, hair braided fresh and tied with a red ribbon she said was her lucky truth color. Inside, the gallery was packed. Reporters, law students, neighbors, and strangers who had followed the trial on the evening news. The energy was thick with anticipation, the kind that hums before history changes its tone. Judge Brigg entered, robes trailing like a curtain call. He surveyed the room, his eyes sharp yet kind. This court has reviewed every exhibit, testimony, and affidavit, he began. And it is time to close this chapter. Kiana sat stiffly beside her lawyer, dressed in muted gray now, pride stripped to bare skin. Preston Vale was nowhere in sight. He had been arrested overnight for attempted property fraud and witness coercion, escorted out of his penthouse in handcuffs. The rumor mill said his partners were turning on him already. Briggs' gavel came down once, quiet but final. On the matter of Hale versus Mercer, this court hereby grants full and irrevocable custody of minor Nia Hale to her father, Mr. Andre Hale, with shared guardianship rights to Mrs. Corinne Hale. Kiana's head dropped. Briggs continued, voice steady as scripture. All assets under investigation remain frozen pending criminal inquiry. The residence at 1181 Willow Crest is hereby confirmed as sole property of Mr. Hale, protected under state disability provisions. Ms. Mercer is found complicit in attempted fraudulent conveyance and coercion of a minor witness. The court orders supervised visitation only after psychological evaluation and counseling completion. He paused, then looked toward me. Lastly, the court recognizes Mrs. Corinne Hale for her instrumental role in uncovering systemic abuse of power within real estate filings and her service as a self-represented advocate. The Board of Ethics has submitted a recommendation that her law credentials be reinstated. The room erupted, claps muffled by awe, whispers breaking into applause. I bowed my head once. Thank you, Your Honor. Andre turned, tears wetting his lashes. We made it, Ma. We did, I whispered. But we didn't win, the truth did. Kiana stood to speak, voice trembling. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted a life that felt easy. Briggs sighed. You wanted comfort at the cost of conscience. That's not life. That's escape. And it always runs out. Her mother began crying quietly in the gallery. Kiana tried to meet my eyes, but I couldn't give her hate. Only exhaustion. There's no joy in watching someone drown in their own choices, only the hope they'll learn to swim before the current ends them. As the bailiff guided her out, Nia whispered, Will Mom be okay? I knelt to meet her gaze. She will be someday. But we have to let people face what they've done, baby. That's how they learn. Nia nodded slowly, her small fingers squeezing mine. Then I'll pray for her. And that, I said, smiling through tears, is why your heart will always stay light. Weeks passed. Bronze Harbor moved on, as cities do. Vale's company collapsed, and the papers said new housing reforms were being drafted in his wake. Tamara Bloom was offered immunity and a full-time job in the city's compliance unit. She sent me a thank you card that simply read, You showed me courage doesn't always come with titles. Andre began physical therapy with renewed purpose. Every day, his stride lengthened. Every day, his laughter returned. The house, once a battlefield, filled again with music, Nia's homework songs, my gospel hums, and Andre's old blues station humming in the background. We replaced broken curtains, repainted walls, and planted fresh flowers beneath the persimmon tree. One Sunday afternoon, the fruit finally ripened, deep amber, sweet-smelling, soft to the touch. Nia plucked one, ran to me, and shouted, Grandma, look! The promise tree kept its word. I smiled. It always does, baby. It just waits for the right season. A month later, I received an envelope embossed with the state seal. Inside was a letter. To Mrs. Corinne Hale, upon unanimous recommendation, the State Bar of Bronze Harbor reinstates your legal license, effective immediately. We welcome your return to the practice of law. Chairwoman D. Ellison. Andre found me staring at it on the porch. Ma, he said, grinning. Guess the queen really is back. I laughed softly. No queens here. Just a mother who learned the law is still her second language. He looked out toward the lake. So what now? Now, I said, we help the next family standing where we once stood. That evening, we gathered around the kitchen table. 3 generations, one light above us, one story finally laid to rest. Nia colored in her notebook while Andre scrolled through photos of the house renovation. Grandma, she said suddenly, can I tell our story at school for show and tell? Of course, I answered. What will you call it? She thought for a moment, then smiled. The day the truth came home. Tears pricked my eyes before I could stop them. Perfect, I said. The wind outside moved softly through the persimmon leaves, carrying the scent of something that felt like peace. I watched Andre and Nia laughing together, the sound pure and steady, and for the first time in years, my heart didn't ache from holding the world up. It just beat, free and quiet. Justice had come, not loud, not cruel, but steady, deliberate and real. And I, Corinne Hale, the woman they once called the Queen of Law, had learned the simplest truth of all. When you fight for what's right with love instead of revenge, the law becomes what it was meant to be, a way home. And that's how our story ends, not with revenge, but with restoration. Corinne didn't just defend her son. She reclaimed her voice, her legacy, and the meaning of justice itself. Andre found strength beyond the scars. And little Nia? She learned that truth may stumble, but it never truly falls. Because sometimes the sweetest victories aren't loud. They're the quiet moments when peace finally sits at your table again. If this story touched you, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us keep telling powerful tales of justice, redemption, and poetic payback where every twist reminds us that karma keeps its receipts. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Corinne's shoes? Your voice might be the light someone else needs today. Stay tuned for the next story. Another tale where truth rises, family stands tall, and strength wears a mother's face. Because here, every story ends the same way, with courage winning.